Have you ever gone to hit your snare drum and it sounds something like this? In today's video, I'm going to show you how to go about tuning my snare drum using the TuneBot. My channel is all about music lessons and tip videos just like this, how to tune a snare drum for recording. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, I want to encourage you to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the future videos coming out. So the first thing I want to do is flip this drum upside down, and I'm actually going to place it on the drum throne I'm sitting on. That way I muffle the side that I don't want to hear right now. In order to tune the bottom head, we need to get these snare wires out of the factor. So we're going to stick a drumstick underneath the wires going across the head. To get the drumstick under there, you need to loosen the snare wires. There should be some sort of dial near the throw. Make sure you release the throw so that the snare wires are nice and loose. And then you can take a drumstick and insert it underneath the wires. Now that the snare wires are out of the way, I can actually hit the bottom of the snare drum head and actually hear what note it's being tuned to. Just to start from scratch, I'm going to loosen all the lugs on the bottom head so that way we're all starting at the same place. All right, now when it comes to the bottom of the snare drum head, I rarely ever change the bottom of this head unless it's broken or I can see a dent in it. You're not actually hitting this side, so rarely do you need to change it. If you do want to change the bottom head, now would be the time to take this off and put the new bottom head on. So now that all the lugs are loose, I'm just going to fidget with the head a little bit, make sure that it can seat correctly, and then I'm going to go around and finger tighten each of the lugs. All right, now all the lugs are finger tight on the bottom head. I'm going to grab another drumstick and I'm going to place the TuneBot on the bottom of the snare drum head. And let's just see, is it even producing a note at all when it's finger tight? All right, a 140, I'm using my drum frequency chart here that I mentioned in the other video. Looks like 140 is right at a C sharp, okay? In previous videos, I've said that whatever note you want your drum to be, the bottom head needs to be an octave above that. That's actually pretty low. That would mean if I wanted this snare drum to be a C sharp, I would actually need this 140 to be a 277 or a 280 to get it to C sharp. So for our first tuning, I want this snare drum to be the note D. So on the bottom head, let's see what note we need to braze it to. Looks like I need the D to be at 293 on the bottom head. So I'm going to grab my tuning key here. I've got all my lugs numbered on the bottom head. So I'm going to go to where number 1 is. I'm going to hit the drum head. Again, it's at 138. So let's give this a quarter turn and see where that's at. Okay, so I've given each lug about a quarter turn. So let's see where our number 1 lug is now. Now it's hitting 209. We need to go to 293, so let's give it another quarter turn all the way around. All right, so if you're keeping up, we've finger tightened the lugs, and then we've given each lug a quarter turn and another quarter turn. Let's see where it's at. 262. All right, we still got to go to 293, so let's try another quarter turn or so. All right, 297, so we're actually 4 hertz above where we're supposed to be. I've locked in the 297, which is pretty close to the D what we need. Now I need to go to each lug and see how far each lug is from 297 exactly. So when I hit each lug, it's telling me how many hertz away from 297 I am. The worst I saw was this third lug right here. It actually had a 4. Now it doesn't mean that it's 4 above where the note. You need to look at where the needle is on the TuneBot. It said that I was 4 hertz below the note that it was supposed to be. So that one I had to turn up significantly more than the others. The others, if it's about 0.5 or half of a hertz away from where it's supposed to be, it's actually going to read green, and that's close enough for me. When I hit the bottom snare, it's reading 297. So now we're going to flip the snare drum over and we're going to tune the top head to the A below the D that we just tuned. All right, just like before, we're going to go around each lug, we're going to loosen them, and then we're going to finger tighten each lug. All right, now the snare drum top is finger tight. Let's see what note we're producing. All right, that's right at 80 or 81, very low. So the A we need to get to is at 110, and I can tell you already, this snare drum is gonna be, this is about as low as tuning you're gonna be able to get, because I'm pretty sure I'm only gonna be able to get a quarter turn off of each lug on here. Let's try. All right, I've given each lug a quarter turn. Let's see where we're at now. All right, we're already at 158. I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to get to 110, but let's try. So I've got to actually, this would be finger tight, but maybe an eighth of a turn. Basically, if I hit this snare drum too hard at this low of a tuning, I might actually get the lugs to pop off one day. It's very low. All right, the lowest I could get this is 113. This is probably as low as the snare drum's gonna go. I'll hold the snare drum up, I'll turn on the snare wires, I'll tighten the snare wires again, and let's see how low this note actually is, okay? This is probably not even playable as a drum tuning, so let's raise this thing up quite significantly. All right, so last time I tuned this snare drum for a video, I tuned it to the note G3. And to get to that, I need the bottom head to be 392. All right, so now the bottom head is 392. I'm gonna tune the top head to 293. As you're tuning each of the lugs of the snare drum, you're going to start hearing this whistle sound, and that drum is actually giving you a note. It's letting you know, hey, you're actually in the fundamental frequency range that I can produce as a drum. As the pitch is getting higher and higher on the snare drum, you'll start to hear that whistle tone start to get choked off to where it's not producing necessarily a note anymore. And that's the upper end of the frequency range. So this snare drum, trying to tune it to G3, I'm actually starting to choke off that fundamental of the snare. That might actually be something that you want, okay? A cranked snare drum sounds very good, but a flabby snare drum, something that's not got any tuning on it at all, it's just finger tight, it's really not gonna produce any of that note. It's just gonna be almost like a kick drum for your snare. And as you're hearing that whistle tone, you're gonna hear it get louder and louder, and then you're gonna start to hear it get choked off. The loudest part is probably the fundamental frequency of your snare drum. It doesn't mean that you have to tune to that specific frequency, but that's gonna give you kind of the median of where you're allowed to tune that snare drum. Depending on the snare drum that you have, it may not be able to produce the exact note that you want without it getting choked off or without it being too loose. You gotta find that compromise in the middle. It also depends on the genre that you're playing. Now, even though the TuneBot is kind of reading a G3 and sometimes an F sharp, I'm not too worried about that because every time I hit the snare drum, it's going to be different. If you hit the snare drum really hard, it's going to produce a different note than if you hit it softly. What matters is the snare drum, are the lugs in tune with each other? And that's where the TuneBot excels. Here's my snare drum at G3. Now I'm going to put some moon gel on it and hear how it changes. Just to recap, to get this snare drum tuned like it is, I tuned the bottom head to 392. I tuned the top head, the side that you hit, to 293, and this is the sound that it produced. Again, check out the frequency chart. I've had a lot of success with the bottom head of whatever drum I'm tuning. make that an octave above the note that you want. If you want to tune your drum to an F, try making the bottom head or the resonant head, try to make it an F, okay? Then on the side that you hit, using a little bit of music theory, I want you to tune it to the fifth below the bottom head. So in the situation of if you're tuning to an F on the bottom, you need to tune the top drum to a C. And then when you hit the drum, it'll actually produce the F that's an octave below the bottom head. Hope that makes sense. If you enjoy tip videos like this, or you want to take some free music lessons, all those are on my channel. This is what I do. So music lessons and tips. I hope you'll consider subscribing, and we'll see you next time.